ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles. Now, y'all know me, I'm Nick. Everyone knows that. But the man to the right of me is, he's the man. You know, he is too hot to hold, too hot to handle, too cold to hold. And, of course, he's funky like a monkey. And his name's Cueball Carmichael. Q, welcome to the show, my man. How are you?
Hey, Nick, doing fantastic. I can't believe it's the fastest hour of the week coming up upon us again on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. I just wanted to tell our wonderful fans, if they would, to please slide over to YouTube, Triple T Radio, one word, space, live, one word, and check us out on YouTube. Please hit like and please hit subscribe because it does help us in our efforts to continue our show.
This is very true, you know. And Q would never stir you guys wrong. He's being very upfront and honest with you. I mean, Q, you know. If you go over to tripletradio.com, you can check all sorts of stuff out there. And that'll even take you to our YouTube, to our Facebook pages, our Twitter handles, everything. You know, we are so socially interactive with our fans. It's great. It's one of the things I'm most proud of is the following that we've been able to receive from everyone, and of course our friends and family that have supported us during this whole crazy thing. But the one thing that we have in common is 80's tag team wrestling. And now I know what you're thinking. I know. You're going to say, Nick, my favorite tag team are the Dudley Boys. I'm sorry. That's into the 2000s, late 90s. Scratch it. Maybe your favorite tag team was Edge and Christian. Nope, scratch that too. Not in my zone. But if your favorite tag team could be someone like, I don't know, the Rockers, we might be talking in the same area. So tonight just happens to be Cueball's 80's tag team wrestling, which is a lot of fun to talk about, Q, because it literally was the golden age of professional wrestling. Am I right?
Yeah, I think the 80's was an era where the wrestling business had started to change. It had started to get national acclaim and national attention, primarily with the movements of two things. You had the WTBS, the Superstation out of Atlanta, that had World Championship Wrestling, Georgia Championship Wrestling, and then you had the WWF, which really hit its stride in the 80's big time. I mean, it was, Saturday night's main event. They had so many shows. They were only filling a couple hours during a week, and they had a lot of great talent and a lot of great content. And that stuff from the 80's, as far as I'm concerned, still holds water today. I mean, some of it was the best wrestling that you're ever going to find. Not that I'm stuck on the past. There's great wrestling out there now. There was great wrestling in the 90's, the early part of the millennium. But tonight, we're going to focus on 80's tag team wrestling, which, man, doesn't get any better than that, in my opinion, brother.
Dude, tag team wrestling was hot in those days. Let me tell you, whether it was Mid-South, whether it was Georgia Championship Wrestling, it didn't matter if you were down with the Jarretts, whether you were in Memphis, whether you were in Texas, whether you were in New York. Okay? Professional wrestling was blooming, and the tag team division was far, far more superior than what it is today. And everyone knows that.
And I think, Nick, that's a lot of what's missing today, because most wrestlers who have been around a while know that the psychology of tag team wrestling is completely different than the psychology of the singles match. It's a total different animal. And so you have to use that psychology as a wrestler to your advantage. And guys that did really put themselves on the map as tag team specialists. and probably ultimately the dominant era of tag teams. I don't think, if you think 80s tag teams just fly out of your mouth. I mean, they really do. You just remember so many great ones. But
Well, let
we've
me
got a
ask
list,
you,
folks,
but
and we're going to start and go down the list.
let's sidebar just really quick. I just want to ask you one question. One of the big things right now in AEW is not holding the rope, not holding the tag team rope. I just want your feelings on that because that tag team rope is your heat seeking missile. I mean, the one thing you've got is, the referee watches your hand. That's your cheating mode. What do you think? I've heard Jim Ross, he really craps on it, but what do you think of them getting rid of that and eliminating what I would call a main heat seeker in pro wrestling?
Yeah, no, I think, they originally called it an Australian rules tag match when you had the rope in the corner. I like it. I like it a lot because you can do so much more with that added piece of rope. You really can. Especially the heels can use it obviously to their advantage, but so can the baby faces. And for me, growing up, it was always there. So I like it. I think you can get better heat with it. I think you can get the hot tag better with it. I always liked it. Some guys don't, and that's fine. But I always did because it made you maintain a position. You know, and by maintaining that position, you could use that to make your match psychologically stronger, in my opinion.
No, I agree. Now, and one of the things I want to do with you tonight is obviously we're talking a little bit about tag team wrestling to start the show, and about the 20 to 10 mark, or 20 to 9 your time, Eastern, we'll start naming the top 10 in our view. But to kind of kick off the show on tag team wrestling, who is the one team out there that you just, it doesn't have to be your number one, because I don't even want to talk numbers until we get there. But, like, who's a tag team Q that you think of quite a bit, maybe someone that you looked up to in the 80s that you enjoyed watching?
Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express. Those are the two that come to mind when I think tag team specialist, real tag team matches. I mean, there's a lot of them, but those are the first ones that come to my mind. I
I
think
love
probably
that.
with a lot of people, yeah.
I love that because, you know what? If I was going to pick a team from the 80s for me, it would probably be the Midnight Rockers, but that's my era. Or even the Dream Team. Again, just phenomenal. For me, it was all about charisma. And when you say the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, man, they oozed charisma. Am I right?
Yeah. When I talk to people about learning how to be a good baby face, I always say my two Rickies, Ricky Morton, Ricky Steamboat. I always say if you want to be a baby face, those are the guys to watch and learn from, you know. And geez, I mean they just had I mean as a tag team, they had people eating out of their hand, man. They just really did.
No, you're 100% right. You know what? And that's what I loved about the Rockers. The Midnight Rockers, as they started, and of course, as we all know, they would go up to New York and be shipped right back out. But I mean, that's for another day. But they were another team, Q, that oozed charisma. They were tag
Sure.
team specialists. Everything they did together.
Yes. And they were extremely athletic too, which, doesn't hurt, that's for sure. And so, you got two super athletic guys that can do stuff in the ring that other tag teams couldn't do. That added that much more charisma and pizzazz. In the 80s, when a guy got tagged in and he jumped over the top rope to come in a house of fire on a hot tag, that meant something because people knew when to pull those things out of the bag and when not to.
And who I think of when you say the hot tag, it has to be Robert. No. Let me. The way Ricky Morton could get in there, and Ricky was always fire, and Robert, the way he could sell for you, as he crawled his way to the ring, crawled his way to the corner and got that hot tag, or the way Ricky would do it. They always they had it, and everything they did made sense.
My favorite was always when Robert took the heat and tagged Ricky for the hot tag. That was always my favorite. Whenever Robert was taking the heat and he made that hot tag to Ricky Morton, I mean, the epitome of babyface fire.
Well, the roof would blow off the place.
Yeah.
It's almost like what do they call that in professional wrestling again? A Road Warrior pop. Did you see what I just did there?
I see you shifting gears there.
A Road Warrior pop. Some call it legendary. They say you had to be in the building and you had to feel the energy. I think of the time you told me that Stone Cold stunned Vince and the pyro had nothing on the crowd. A Road Warrior pop, they say, could tear the roof off a building.
Yeah, they were, they were another team they were the first bodybuilder type, heavily muscled tag team. There was the Barbarian and the Warlord, don't get me wrong, but the Road Warriors were on a little bit different level, and I don't mean any disrespect to Bar or the Warlord, but they were just something about the Road Warriors that when they showed up, people went, damn.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, they did. And they had Paul Ellering, who would just add to that intense heat. People think they were always fan favorites, and that's not the case.
No.
Those guys were heel to the core. And the stuff they would do, and having a guy like Paul Ellering as a manager only added to that heat.
Well, wait, when they were heels, he was Precious Paul Ellering.
Oh, jeez. My bad.
I mean, look, you got two monsters, and then their manager is called Precious Paul Ellering. Think of the irony there of these two big, brutal beasts that bench press 500 pounds with ease. And their manager, Paul Ellering, was always built really good, but he was able to hide it under his clothing really well. And so when he insisted on being called Precious Paul Ellering, yet you got these two behemoths, it was the ultimate combination of what the is going on here.
Yeah. It really was. I always it was like there was nothing better than a mixed match that you kind of looked at it. Like I always said that about like Slick, when Slick managed the Twin Towers. Like it just seemed weird, like if you were ever in the wrong position, that was it. Like it just they always, when I looked at them, I would think, oh, they're Bobby Heenan's boys. Right. And you couldn't help yourself but think that. You that's what I mean when you say that about Paul Ellering. I feel you. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and you know what we've got to do? And write this down, Nick. You're good. We need to have a show just on managers.
I'd love that idea. I really would.
I think that's a great idea. So put that in the notes for down the road. But, look, managers made the tag teams in the 80s too. They were an intricate part of the tag teams. If you think about it, who can imagine the Midnight Express without Jim Cornette and his Dennis Rack?
You can't.
You can't. They were so integral and so intertwined and so just where they needed to be when they needed to be there, and a part of the match just at the right time. I mean, it was crazy. The best tag teams. You got to look at it. I mean, the best tag teams always seem to have a good manager. Let's look at the Wild Samoans
There you
and
go.
Albano.
The
I
craziest
mean,
guy in the world.
exactly.
He refused to be fired.
Yeah.
I've heard it a million times. Lou, you're
I,
fired. I'll see you next week. He refused to be fired.
I know he did, and he was wild, and you get those wild eyes and talk about these mad men from the island of Samoa.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
crazy good, perfect pairing. Again, a perfect pairing. I mean, just incredible.
absolutely. And
The,
I'll tell you another one now. The Dream Team had Jimmy Hart. I couldn't picture Jimmy not managing, the Dream Team. They were perfect together. They had records. Jimmy was into the music. Like they always fit the gimmick. So if you were coming out and you were into that, that was the one thing about Vince Jr. that Senior was not always doing was managers fit the gimmick. So, that was something that, Jimmy Hart was ahead of his time. Like really, the microphone. Really I know it started before that, but that was when he managed them was when it really came together, you know?
absolutely, absolutely. You know, I mean, you just think of the '80s and in the incredible amounts of tag teams. I mean, there were guys that were um how do I say this? There was like A and B tag teams. There were so many tag teams that they actually had almost some enhancement tag teams back in the day. But geez, I think of the Wild Samoans, and that's near and dear to my heart because everybody knows that my first training was at Peter Maivia's school in Hawaii, and I trained with a guy named Stevie Affi, who's still a friend of mine today. As a matter of fact, he lives back in Samoa. We communicate through Facebook, and he was a big part of my training because at the time he was a superstar in Pacific Polynesia. And what a lot of people don't understand is Pacific Polynesian Pro Wrestling, sanctioned by the National Wrestling Alliance from Honolulu, Hawaii in 1983, reached a billion people every week. A
Wow.
billion. It was throughout Southeast Asia. It was throughout Micronesia. It was throughout Pacific Polynesia. It was shown in California because Ed Francis had a stake in it. So this show in the '80s was seen by more people each week on TV than anything Vince would come up with for eons. A billion people. Crazy. It's the only unfortunate thing is they didn't understand how to monetize that. But a
No,
billion
that's
people
right.
all over Australia. I mean, just the combination when you get into Micronesia, Pacific Polynesia, Burma, you get into China, you get into places like that. Uh, there's nothing to do but watch TV, and wrestling was the thing back then, and throughout all that area. So the guys that were the regulars, guys like Sivafi, these guys couldn't walk down the street in Hawaii. They couldn't walk down the street in Australia or New Zealand. They couldn't walk down the street anywhere in Micronesia without actually being recognized, you know, and by a billion people because that's who saw him on the lead into the show. So that's a crazy thing too. That was a crazy, crazy times.
And
And
not all great tag teams had a name either. Let's not forget about someone like Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher.
oh yeah,
They were so good. Some teams just didn't need a name because they were a perfect package.
and their whole entire thing was they were going to go out, listen to some polka music, drink some beers, and they always called women dollies. They were going to go drink some beer, and listen to some polka music, and listen to dollies. Now you have to understand, Chicago at that time had a massive, massive Polish American community. So when Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher went out there and they talked about polka, listening to polka music and drinking beer, they were hitting home with the working class people of that era so well. It's like Dusty Rhodes, right? What's his most famous speech?
What? Wine and dine with kings and queens? There's a million of them.
Common Man,
The
you
common
know.
mate, yeah.
I mean, just, and that's what these guys have done too. So, 80s tag teams, I mean, it was just incredible. And I had hoped at that point I would like to have seen how dominant the Midnight Rockers could have been had they stayed together. I think that they would have been mentioned in the same breath with the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight
The
Express. I really do.
Rockers, the Rockers.
Yeah,
I
Rockers, yeah.
100% yes.
Originally,
Yeah,
originally they were Midnight Rockers,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
they
But I
broke.
want to make sure you were. That's what you were
Oh
meaning.
yeah, oh yeah, the Rockers.
Absolutely. If the Rockers never broke up in '91, we would still we would talk about them today, but as a unit,
Yeah,
100%. They'd both be in the Hall of Fame. They'd both be talked about as the greatest tag team. They'd be in that category with the Rock and Roll, with the Midnight. They'd be in it with the Road Warriors. 100%, 100%.
now here's another great tag team I just want to throw out there. Guys that were famous for years as being singles wrestlers, tagged up a few times. They go to the WWE and they become the Brainbusters.
Oh baby,
Right?
Double A baby.
I mean, that's almost, I don't want to say it's a homemade tag team, but when they were tagging before, there's no question.
Yep.
But when they were brought into the WWE, they were made exclusively, primarily, a tag team. And man, they were dominant, and they were old school. The fanciest move was the Brainbuster, obviously. Kind of like Coco Beware's Ghostbuster, but I mean, it was a thing where they took these guys, they had seen them tag together, but primarily been known for being part of the Horsemen, right? And then they bring him in and they put him up there, and look what they do as a tag team in the right environment. When tag teams were flourishing, you know, when the tag team uh, division was as dominant and prominent as at least the Intercontinental title or an equal to the world title a lot of times. A lot of those tag team matches sold out buildings. Could you imagine today a tag team match that was so built up and so anticipated that it would sell out a building?
No, I
Not really.
can't. I can't. I wish I could, but I can't think of any. Guys are just
Yeah,
thrown
to me,
together. If you throw a couple guys together, yeah, you'll sell the building out. But a real tag team match is for the belts. I'm talking Hart Foundation, Danny Davis stuff. Like, no, not today.
that's right. The Killer Bees, even. I mean, it's just crazy that how well that they put these teams together. So let's start working down our list on the ones that we planned on talking about. You start ones we haven't talked about yet.
Whew. Well, um, I didn't expect you to say start with ones we haven't. I'll tell you one that stands out because of the era is the Mega Powers. I don't.
Oh
Yes,
yeah,
they were thrown together, but they also headlined a SummerSlam. They were together for a Survivor Series. They became together at WrestleMania 4, and then would collide at 5. But the fact is, they made an impact, and Miss Elizabeth was the thing that really made that thing shine. Is that right? Am I fair?
yeah, yeah. And I think it ended up using her to a suiting end. But once again, a lot of the common thread that we're finding here is a lot of these tag teams had great managers or
Yes.
valets or whatever you want to call them, you know. So I think that's important to recognize that. And then look, um, we had tag teams that didn't have a manager. We had the Bushwhackers, right?
Oh my
Now
goodness, they were amazing. Amazing.
you take you take two guys that were the most feared tag team, not just on one continent or one country, Australia, New Zealand, North America. If you want to be fair, Canada, and the U.S., but all over the world, England, all over the world as the sheep herders. They were the most violent tag
Oh,
team in the world. But here's two guys, and me and Jimmy Cicero had the pleasure of wrestling the Bushwhackers a few times, really learning from them. Um, we one time in particular, we were wrestling at an outdoor glass festival, and there was literally probably 3,000 plus people there at the wrestling show. There were 7,000 in attendance, but there's probably 3,000 people at the wrestling show. And I'd done some tag team wrestling up to that point. It was just coming into the earlier mid '90s, and these guys were dominant in the '80s, as we know. And we had so much heat that Butch told Luke told the referee to go over and tell Cueball and Cicero, don't lock up till the heat dies. Now we're in Pennsylvania. It's a pretty warm day, high 80s, not much humidity. So it's literally over 20 minutes before we lock up because the heat just wouldn't die. And I'm so glad that I got to learn from him. I'm so glad he was smart enough to send the ref over and tell us that uh, because it was just unbelievable. The match probably went 8 minutes, but we're out there for over half an hour, and 20 minutes of it was heat. And when we all got to the back and took showers, we all came out, and all of us were sunburned from being out there in the ring so long. Just,
wow.
just and there was it's hard to describe what 20 minutes of heat is before you ever lock up. But the Bushwhackers were such a popular tag team.
They sure
People
were.
loved antics that they created. I mean, those were their ideas. Back in the 80s, and this is why I think a lot of individuals flourished that might not have in any era, but a lot of tag teams flourished is back then Vince or anybody would come up with an idea for a gimmick. And then they would say, hey, look, here's what we want to do with it. And oftentimes, more times than not, the input of the wrestlers is what created the persona or the gimmick. And the Bushwhackers were well respected and were pretty much given free reign to create, or the Sheepers to create the Bushwhacker gimmick. And really, when you think about it, I mean, they were just so popular and so loved. Again, the second they came out and started licking a little kid's head and pumping them arms, the crowd would just go
Lost it.
insane, insane.
Yeah.
And their finishing move, I took it. It was a side headlock into a headbutt into the stomach for the 1, 2, 3. Guess what? Nobody gets hurt. Everybody has fun. The finishing move was signature, and they were over like Rover, brother. Just amazing. Amazing
Absolutely.
tag team.
Listen, we're 9 minutes away from counting down the top 10. I need to take a quick break. When we come back, it is already the bottom of the hour. So, Q, sit tight. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back with more Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles. All right, guys, we're back here on Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles. I'm Nick, that's Q. And we got about 5, maybe 7 minutes left before we start the top 10. Q, take me into another great tag team.
Well, I don't think any tag team category would be complete if we didn't mention the one and only British Bulldogs. Wow.
Wow, there's a
They
great tag
they
team.
exploded on the scene, man.
They
And they
did.
were athletic. And they could do anything, man. It was crazy. I gotta say, honestly, you know what a fan I am of Stampede.
Oh, yes.
So, and how I kind of pride myself on, knowing things like the first ever three-way dance was called the Bermuda Triangle match, and Stu Hart invented it, and Stu and Bruce and the guys did. And little things like that about Stampede, and just one of my all-time favorite promotions ever. But look, there's so many good tag teams. I mean, what about as long as we're going overseas, let's just go to Canada. Let's talk about the Rougeau brothers. I
Another
mean,
great team.
they were really, really good, man.
They had
I
great
mean,
heat.
unbelievable. They had great heat.
They could
They knew
get
how to play in
heat.
the U.S. Oh yeah, they had great heat. They really did.
Well, if you're gonna
Um,
throw one Canadian one at me, I'm gonna throw a good American team at you. The good old Blackjacks.
oh, Mulligan and Lanza. Oh my gosh.
Well, I figured
Two
you'd throw them
monsters,
at me, so I'm gonna throw one at you.
two monsters. Blackjack Mulligan and I communicated a lot before his passing a few years ago. He would always read my post and bust my chops, which was great. Just to have a guy like that pay any attention to you at all, being a relative independent known star was pretty good. But I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, jeez. Just big, strong,
Yeah,
Texas ornery men. And, for me as a kid, when I saw them, they were frightening.
yeah, they
They were
were.
so big. It was, in my head, that became how everybody from Texas looked. You know, Everybody from Texas was 6'6", dark hair,
Had
gigantic
chaps.
guy. Yeah, that you didn't mess with. They looked like they got off a horse and came to kick ass. That's
Yep.
what it looked like. It was just crazy, crazy good, man, for sure. Let me throw another Canadian team back
Oh,
at
go
you.
right ahead.
It's really not fair. It's the entire Hart Foundation. I mean, the
They
Hart
do not
Foundation,
get
man,
recognized for what they've done.
they did not. They did not, because they all did a lot of individual stuff. But in any combination of those guys together, I mean, Brett and Jim Neidhart, I mean, they were probably the most well known of the two as a tag team. And they were just incredible because Anvil was the power guy and Brett was the excellence of execution. You
Oh,
know,
yes.
in my opinion, for what it's worth, Bret Hart stands alone in the top of a dozen wrestlers that come to my mind when I think legends and icons. I'll always put Bret Hart up there on the top of the list, man. He was just so good. I mean, the line that he came up with, their best there is, the best there ever was. I mean, to a certain point, that was a lot of that was true.
Yes, it
You know,
was.
he at that time, as an active wrestler at that time, he could make that claim and be somewhat legitimate, especially in the WWF at the time. You know, there had been some great wrestlers, but Brett was the ultimate wrestling machine, in my
Yeah, he
opinion.
was. No,
He
I agree.
he could. There's a match from Saturday night's main event: Bret Hart against Bam Bam Bigelow. And let me tell you something. Two amazing things happened. Brett gave an absolute clinic on how to wrestle a big guy, and Bam Bam gave an absolute clinic on how to be a great big guy wrestler. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I had that match for years on tape and DVD, and I'd probably watched it 30 times over the years, and just was kind of in awe about how Brett made him look so strong, but yet how he also got Brett over so well at the same time. It was a clinic match for me. Not to get too far off the tag team end here. Um, we do have to talk about um, the variations, I think, of the Midnight Express over the years. And who was your favorite two guys? Some were interchangeable parts.
For me?
Yeah, for
Oh,
you. The other guy.
Stan Lane and Loverboy Dennis Condrey. Absolutely. Dennis Condrey was definitely the longest running with them. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, Loverboy.
yeah.
Yeah, no,
And
I
Sweet,
love Loverboy. Sweet
yeah,
Stan,
Sweet
yeah.
Stanley. Yeah, I mean that's my favorite combination too. Coincidentally, of the guys that were interchangeable in there, and we also have to talk about the Fantastics.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean the Fantastics, right? I mean, yeah, just another one of those. I think they oftentimes got sort of lumped in or compared to the Rock and Roll Express, but they were different and they were unique and very charismatic. Bobby Fulton still, great guy, great guy. I really knew him the best of the two, or know him the best of the two. But I mean, we're talking about a tag team that had charisma, that had skill and ability and can wrestle pretty much with anybody. So we got to throw them in there.
Well, I'm gonna lead off this with I want you to pick your number 10 if and these are the thing people need to realize is all this stuff is debatable. I mean, everyone has their own opinion. None of this stuff is obviously set in stone, so we don't need like hate tweets and emails. We're well aware that we're not every person this is going to be what they want. So in your eyes, Q, if you were going to name number 10 on your list, who would you pick for number 10? And then we'll talk a little bit about them before we move on.
I would probably pick as number 10 the Rockers. And the reason I say that is they'd be higher up if they would have had longevity. But because of their very short tenure as a tag team, you have to take that in consideration of tag teams like the Rock and Roll Express that still tag today together, you know. So I would put the Rockers at number 10, not based on skill and ability, but based on longevity.
I think the Rockers um, I think it's fair to say that number one, they were ahead of their time. Obviously, I mean, we laugh when we say tag team specialists, but they really were the epitome of tag team specialists. Whether they were high flying, whether you've heard them say how the Brainbusters really taught them a lot, how to slow down, tell a story. They matured a lot. Their first run, not so much. Their second run was amazing, and I think that you're right when you say that if they would have stayed together, we'd put them in the same category as all the other great tag teams, and they should be in the Hall of Fame. I think still, even right now, the Rockers should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. Well, that's my pick.
Okay. Okay, perfect. You do number 9. We'll rotate on and off here.
I just hope you understand that this is really hard for me. Whenever someone says, Nick, give me your top 10, I'm like, man, no. No, I don't do that. That's what I tell people. I don't do that.
Well, how
No,
about
no.
this? Our top 10 in no particular order.
Oh, whatever. It can be in particular order. I have to go with the British Bulldogs. Mainly the reason I'm saying, if you think Nick, no, that's not where they go, please say it. But, once they separated, or I shouldn't use that, but they never teamed for really all that long. I mean, once they got to the mainstream New York, they were only together for a few years, but I feel that they were good. They were good, but they weren't Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty in my eyes. And please, if you want to fight with me and argue, I welcome it. 100%. I love that.
Yeah, no. I'm gonna throw in a group that we haven't talked about, primarily of AWA fame, but they went other places. And it was Wayne the Train Bloom and Mean Mike Enos as the Destruction Crew. Two big dudes, um, carried sledgehammers, wore the orange vests, wore the hard hats to the ring. Really a team that I think had incredible potential, but I think they were poorly utilized. But I got to throw those guys in there, and anybody that's watched them before or seen them, they had about a 3 or 4 year AWA run. It was pretty strong. They traveled around a little bit. I think that they got to get in there, and when I get down to my top 3 or 4, I'm going to be real serious. These are interchangeable parts based on opinion.
Oh,
And
yeah,
so,
of
if
course.
whoever's watching, if your opinion is different, I respect it. But respect our opinion based on what we're talking about. So, back to you, Nick.
I hate when you do that. Okay, I've got one I got to throw at you, and it's probably should be a little lower, but I'm trying to do this the right way. And, one set of tag team, they had teamed up before and they got together and they were good. And I think you should know where I'm going. They wore red. Bobby Heenan came out with them and wore red too. And they were the Brainbusters. And I can't leave them off this list. Maybe I got them up too high, but the Brainbusters have got to be in there.
Yeah, the Brainbusters, once put together, once given that name, and once be given the sanctioning title as tag team specialists, because that's what they were called, were definitely worthy of a spot in the top 10. And again, keep in mind, most of their careers, they were not the Brainbusters.
That's right.
So it's a small portion of their career, but they had enough of an impact where they definitely deserve to be in there. So good call.
Thank you. What about you, buddy? Now we're
Where
getting
are we
down to the nitty gritty, but
at? What
where are you
number?
at? We're at 6.
We're at 6.
And you can
So
say you and I if you need to.
I got to give you number 5 then, right?
No, you're
Or am I
giving me number 6. Unless you want me to take 6.
So, well, there's so many great ones. I got to get the Fabulous Freebirds in there. I got to get them in. They could have been a little bit higher. Obviously, the next one's going to go right in unison with them. We know who we're talking about. But look, Leonard Skinner Freebird was the mantra of the 70s and 80s for a lot of people. It still today is the number one most requested song on 70s and 80s radio. The only one that comes close that's interchangeable is also Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. But every year when they put out that list of now it's called classic rock, Zeppelin's Freebird and Leonard Skinner rotate first and second place as the most requested songs. Everybody knew it in the 80s. And man, when Freebird came on, people went nuts. They knew who was coming out. That Michael P.S. Hayes had the strut of all struts. Jimmy Garvin had the strut. I mean, these guys had it down. They were sparkly. They were bright. And when they were heels, they had so much heat. It was ridiculous, partially because of who we're going to probably name next. So I'm going to say the Freebird right there.
Okay, and it's so weird that you said that because I had already picked this name, and I'm assuming I'm following suit. But it's funny
Yeah.
because you made that comment, and I'm like, does he see my screen? Like, does he know where I'm at here? I'm saying the Von Erichs because they needed the Von Erichs to get where they were going, and there was nothing more beautiful than the Von Erichs versus the Freebirds.
Oh my gosh, that you want to talk about magic happening when four guys get in a ring or six guys, whatever it was that particular day. I mean, there was absolute magic in the air when the Von Erichs and the Freebirds got together and lit it up. They didn't have to do a lot of crazy stuff, very basic, but everything they did worked. You got to work with the right people, guys who know the business. They all knew the business really well. And gosh, when they got together, I mean, you could feel the electricity in the air when the Von Erichs and the Freebirds were about to clash.
Oh, yes.
So great, 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 great choice. Go right together. Absolutely.
Oh, you're number 4, my man. What do you got?
Number 4.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we're having a draft. Like, it's so funny because there's so much intensity right now. Yeah, yes.
The Road Warriors, the Legion of Doom, whatever you want to call them, especially in the era of Precious Paul Ellering, but not just that. They dominated for a very long time. They were the gold standard of big guys that learned the business, knew how to work, knew what to do, what they had, knew how to sell. I mean, I fortunately in 2000 was in a 6-man. Myself, Jimmy Cicero, Maryland Championship Wrestling Heavyweight Champion, Jimmy Cicero, Tag Team Champions, myself and Dino Divine against the Bruiser out of Maryland Championship Wrestling and the world famous Legion of Doom. And I got to tell you, it was funny in the back. We're all standing there. Now, keep in mind the Bruiser's green. He's with them. Dino Divine is real green, is with us. And so Animal says, who wants to start out with me? I go, I will. He's like, oh, okay. And everybody, like, you hear the other two guys in my tag team go, like, take a sigh of relief.
I've heard so many people say that Joe, like, people were scared. They were legitimately scared because if he was too hyper and too excited, he was going to pick you up and just let you go.
I so liked these guys, and just good guys, tons of experience. I remember we started out doing some stuff. I remember leapfrogging Joe twice. And the third time I tried to leapfrog him, because yes, I could actually leapfrog a guy that size back in the day. He caught me and powerbombed me on the third one. So it was like phenomenal. I'm like, does it get any better? And then at the end of the match, Hawk had said, brother, come here. And I said, what? He said, do me a favor. Not feeling great tonight. Take care of me. It'll end up with you and me on the outside, and we'll let these guys handle the finish. And then he goes, you're the green guy. And he points to Dino. Dino goes, yeah. He goes, okay, you're taking the finish. So he put the finish on the green guy. But, it ended up me and him brawling outside for like 5-6 minutes over the railing. When he ran to throw me over the railing, I just dove headfirst over the railing to the concrete because that's how a guy that size would throw you, and just when we got in the back, both those guys came up and shook our hands and thanks guys seriously for coming out and not knowing who we were going to work with and coming out on an independent show. We really were happy with what we all did, and we, thought it was a great time. So they were very gracious people, but they were intimidating as all get out, man. I mean, because as big as you think they are on TV, you stand next to them, and they're even bigger. So I can see where it'd be intimidating. So I got to put the Road Warriors right up there, man. Longevity, 20 years out there doing what they did. I mean, there was a lot of people weren't happy when they showed up in the wrestling business because wrestling was a business not made for bodybuilders; it was made for wrestlers. And they killed those stigmas, and they were competitive with everybody. It didn't matter who they were wrestling; they would have a competitive match. So,
Well,
kudos to Late Hawk and kudos to Animal.
absolutely. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to take 3 and 2, and I want you to take number 1. It's your show.
Okay.
You take number 1.
Okay.
But my number 3, and I don't know, we never said their name tonight. And I don't know if it just skipped me or not, but what about the U.S. Express with Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham? They were hot and they were over. Big time.
They were, and they were all over. They were in the AWA. They were in Georgia Championship Wrestling. When they showed up on the scene, and Mike Rotunda and I were raised about 35 miles apart in upstate New York, and Mike went to Syracuse University, which is close to me. So a big fan of those guys. But the reason I didn't put them up there higher is only because of their individual separate careers actually supersedes their tag team career, in my opinion.
Okay,
But
well then
that's
no.
your spot.
You're so
mean. It's all based on opinion.
It's all documented.
But you have to look at their life in the business. What were they most known for? Not that.
No, they're most known for being Barry Windham, the crazy cowboy, and Mike Rotunda was the IRS. But I love them. I love them. I do. I love them.
And that's your spot.
Well, you're going to hate me now because number 2, I've got to leave number 1 open for you. And the only way I know how is to take this team. And I just hope we're in the same page here. But I've got to put the Hart Foundation there in number 2. And I'm leaving number 1 for what I think. If I'm not, that's even better because that's the whole point. So number 2 for me is the Hart Foundation. Before you say anything, we got 3 minutes left. I very quickly want to let people know that this show has been awesome. And next week, we're doing the 90s of greatest tag teams. This was Q's idea to do the 80s and the 90s, and it's been awesome. So Q, the top 3 I had, number 2 and number 3, because I left you number 1. I picked the U.S. Express and the Hart Foundation. Your turn, buddy. Number 1.
Well, I'm going to go based on titles, income, skill and ability as a tag team, and longevity. And I'm going to tell you, the greatest tag team in my mind that ever stepped foot in the ring is none other than the Rock and Roll Express.
Oh, okay. So I just want everyone to know just how serious I am. Every time I hit that button, you guys see that thing scroll. But before he even finished, I already hit save because I already typed it in, and I was hoping. And we are not sharing papers. So yeah, I want everyone to know that.
I can't see what you're doing. You can't see
what I'm awesome.
Doing.
I picked. That's great, man. I'm with you.
And look, in no disrespect to you guys that didn't make the list, they were all great. Ours is based on personal opinion. We share the list. We definitely came up with the same number 1. And we came up with the Freebirds and the Von Erichs together.
Yeah.
The links forever in the history of professional wrestling. So we'd like to know what you think. We also like to ask you one more time. Go over to YouTube, Triple T Radio, Space Live. Go over there, hit like and subscribe. Both on tonight's show would be great. but there's lots of shows over there you can like and subscribe on.
All
Don't
sorts.
forget Thursday night at 8 is Truth Busters with myself and John Stewart and Nick as our producer. But look, I really enjoyed this show more than ever. I really enjoyed this. Great show. I hope the people liked it. I hope y'all watching on Facebook, YouTube liked it. Give us your comments. Let us know who you rank as the top 3. Do that. The top 3. It's pretty easy. Type it in. Let us know. We'll respond to you. I try to get back to everybody. I'm sure Anthony's listening in, and I'm sure that Ray Collette's listening in, and Jeff Chambers, and a whole bunch of people and friends are listening in. And hope you enjoyed the show, guys.
I enjoyed the show. Leave your but like Q said, guys, when you listen to the show, whether you're on wherever you are listening, put your top 3 in the comments for us because we want to talk about it. We are interested to know. If you think our picks were crap, good God, tell us. We're okay with that. You're not going to hurt our feelings. Hey.
I'd love to have the first 10 minutes of next week's show be the discussion of other people's top 3s.
So would I.
That would be.
I
think that would be fantastic, and it would also rock and roll.
I'm going to pass that along for you. Let's see if I can't make that happen. Q.
Thanks.
That's it. We're done. We're gone. But we're going to come back here next Tuesday. And we're going to do the whole thing all over again.
You're listening to Triple T Radio on Facebook. Check us out over there. Triple T Radio, one word, live. Please hit like and subscribe. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, everybody. We love you.